Hi everyone, it's Chelsea here, bringing you another segment of living in Southwest Florida. If you're thinking of moving to Fort Myers, Cape Coral, or any of the surrounding areas, then you've probably done enough research to know that with all of the circumstances we've had over the past 12 months, we've had hyper localized market trends. So today we're going to go ahead and look at where we've started with the year with quarter one, where we're currently at as we move into quarter two, and what I expect to see moving forward with the year. But before we jump in, really quickly, it would mean a lot to me if you could go ahead and hit that like button so that the YouTube algorithms share this information with others and it lets me know what you'd like more of. As a thank you, here's some video of us going over the bridge. It was a gorgeous night, and that's a great sunset. And really quickly, I wouldn't be good at my job if I didn't remind you how much we love helping people from all over the country buy and sell their homes here in Southwest Florida. So if you or anyone you know of are even thinking about moving, then feel free to use that contact information below. All right, let's jump right in. So let's start off with some numbers and then I'll explain what I'm seeing. And what better number to start with than how much things are selling for? Because I think ultimately people want to know first and foremost how much they can get or how much they can expect to spend. In Southwest Florida, the median price for March of 2023 is $445,000. This is the median sales price for the 3,313 homes that closed that month. For those that are unfamiliar with median prices, a median price is a middle point. I'm using median prices instead of average prices because average prices will put all those sales together and divide by the number of houses. That means that average doesn't necessarily give a true representation of where the middle ground is because the highs and the lows and they swing for those numbers drastically. For example, last month, the lowest sold property in the MLS was North Fort Myers mobile home that was damaged by the hurricane and sold for only $20,000. On the other end of the spectrum was a beachfront home with 1.38 acres and 150 feet of shore footage right in walkable Old Naples for a cool $32.5 million. Obviously, neither of these homes are middle of the road, so they can skew the numbers when averaging prices together. Instead, I use median price, which will draw a line and find that middle point and then puts one above and one below and one above and one below until we find exactly where that middle of the market would be. And again, for us this month, that middle point was $445,000. All right, so let's also break down the sales price a little bit more before we move on to the inventory and where we're headed. As you can see from the graphs, we've had a pretty strong start to the year. May of last year was our high point without a doubt, but we are still 2.3% ahead when comparing to last March. Let's be real, last year's numbers were historic. It's the perfect storm, if you will, that created this massive growth. And frankly, it will be hard to ever duplicate that amount of growth that we saw then again. But where we are at is still pretty good considering all the doom and gloom being spouted everywhere. I'm going to come back to this in a minute, but really quickly, I want to switch over to what our market is like. If you are a buyer watching this, then you probably want to know more about how many homes there are to choose from. And if you are a seller, you should probably know about your competition. In March of 2023, we saw 4,927 homes list onto the market. You can see that it's one of the higher months for new inventory of the year. And that's pretty typical. Interestingly enough, pre-pandemic, the highest months would be January in time for those snowbirds that are heading down. But since the pandemic, we've seen this trend of March being the high month as it correlates with our own snowbird sellers finishing out season and then heading back north. Something I want to point out is that our pending sales, or the homes that went under contract during the month of March, was at 3,984 homes. It was actually one of the highest months we've seen since 2016. So buyers were still out there buying heavily. And in fact, you can see that this was the second highest month in the last several years. That was 28% growth over February. But what I find even more interesting is that this was 35% growth from last year. I point this out because if you saw that our biggest month of closings was last May, then those buyers were typically writing contracts in March and April. Now, putting all this data together, this tells me that buyers are absolutely still out there buying. But if you looked at the sale prices before, they're being more strategic. While there may be just as many buyers out there, there's also more inventory, which is allowing prices to stay a little bit more in check than they did before. Actually, let's take a moment here and review inventory. We talked about how many new homes went on the market in March and how that was pretty high month, allowing buyers to have more options. But let's see what those days on market and our absorption rate currently are. An absorption rate tracks our months of inventory. So if we stop today and adding new homes for sale, an absorption rate is going to be how long it would take to sell every single one of those existing homes on the market. In this graph, you can see the blue area would be considered a balanced market. Below the blue line is going to be a seller's market, which is less than 5 months of inventory. About 7 months of inventory would be considered a buyer's market. In March, we currently have 3 months of inventory. As you can see, this is a 70% increase in inventory from last year's historic lows, but this is also reflected in our days of market. In March, our median days of market, or the amount of days a home took to sell, was 27 days. And as you can see, this is higher than it was a year before when it was only days on market was like a staggering 6. But you can also see that prior to the pandemic, our median days on market was more in the 40s. This is good news for both sides because there is absolutely more homes out there that are available to buyers to choose from than there were last year. But we are still seeing considered a seller's market because we're still under an inventory. Homes are still selling and they are selling for a good amount and in a quicker time frame than they previously did. Now, there are some caveats to this, of course. Sellers need to consider that we are not in the same market conditions that we were a year ago. Those buyers out there are buying if it makes sense, and they aren't going to be swayed into overpaying. So, if a seller is pricing their home at market value, then it is selling in a reasonable time. If a homeowner is not pricing their home at a market value rate, then they are expecting to sit longer and they're not selling as quick of a time frame. All right, so what does this mean moving forward? Before I give my personal thoughts, I want to point out this market has been super volatile and it's all over the place. And frankly, none of us are fortune tellers. I reviewed CoreLogic's data yesterday and they anticipate growth of just under 4% through February of 2024. If you're unfamiliar with CoreLogic, they are one of the top largest data providers in the country. But that being said, Fannie Mae and the competitor Moody's Analytics expect a 4.2% decline through the end of the year. My point is that even the experts who spend their times and days solely analyzing the data are not in agreement with where the market will go. And frankly, that's an 8% difference between the two predictions. Regardless, this is speaking of nationwide statistics, and we should be hyper localized here in this market. We've had the hurricane rebuilding, which many other markets have not had to face, and as CoreLogic chief economist wrote, the consistent gains in the Southeast and South reflect strong job markets, in-migration patterns, and relative affordability due to new home construction. So we have a lot going for us that keep our pricing strong or at least stable. I do need to point out that the first quarter of the year is our snowbird season. And historically, snowbird season does tend to keep our marketplace active. The first quarter is often our best time of year. As snowbirds begin to leave around Easter, we do tend to see some downturns in those segments of our market. In the last video about market conditions, I said I expected to see the traditional buyer pool reduced for the next 6 months or so due to the higher interest rates and some market unease. Luckily, that stayed in check for the winter, so it was less of a factor. But I do still think that has some validity moving out of the snowbird season, and I'm going to continue to watch that number to see if it stays the same or if it falls back a little bit. My expectation is that over the next 3 to 6 months, we'll see some slight dips and flat, or maybe a little bit. We'll see likely some wobbling with a good month here and a small dip there, but I'm not expecting to see any major shifts like we did last year. Moving forward, of all the data I review, I really like to follow the pendings as the rest of the data points tend to follow lagging data. A sales price will be something negotiated 30 or 60 days prior, and as such, it's not really reflective of the here and now that we might be seeing signs of. So I will be watching that trend line specifically in the next few weeks to come. At the end of the day, though, it is near impossible to time the market. It's just too finicky, especially right now. If you've talked to me in the past, I usually hesitate to forecast much more than 6 months at a time. Frankly, over the past few years, the housing market has been incredibly volatile, like we discussed. No one saw the beginning of COVID happening. And with the financial segments being volatile right now as well, up and down and up and down, I hesitate to give too much weight to pass the 6 month mark. But at this stage, I would expect to see that in the latter half of the year for some rebounding as inflation is more under control. With a slew of new businesses moving into the area and a low unemployment rate that's lower than the national average, I think once some of the fear there's a subside, we'll see buyers who are resting come back to the market again with more confidence. My best piece of advice is follow your life circumstances and make the best decisions for your family and the lifestyle and the values and the quality of life that you need. All right, if you have any questions about the data or if you'd like to drill down and compare specific neighborhoods, like say Cape Coral versus Fort Myers or waterfront homes or pool homes or whatever your specific circumstances call for, then feel free to reach out. The contact information in the description below. Myself and the network of agents I have throughout the United States are here and ready to help you with your move. My video schedule can sometimes be erratic, so if you'd like more videos like this, then don't forget to hit subscribe so you'll be notified when we drop another one. And if you are ready to go ahead and get that ball rolling with your move to Southwest Florida, then there is a link in the description below to set up a personalized home search that will be tailored to you. Oftentimes, when you search on web aggregates, it limits your capabilities. But when I build this search, you will have many more options available, and then we can begin to have a conversation about what your home in Florida will look like. Or feel free to use Cape Coral Fort Myers realestate.com for all the latest listings to hit the market and begin getting comfortable with our marketplace. No obligations. And don't forget to add me on social media and follow along as we post weekly articles and information that you may find handy and give you insight as to what life in Florida looks like. As always, we really appreciate it when you leave us a comment and hit that like button, subscribe button, and notification bells so that you can be notified when we drop future videos that may help you with living in Southwest Florida. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, I wish you much health and happiness.